At Odds and Ends by Corndog_Patrol and For the Wolfie. Chapter 16 The True Reason. What the fuck is this? Shouta growled, his body naturally falling into a fighting stance. Tensei stopped. The lab, of course? No. Shouta grabbed the vial and held it towards Tensei, the label clear in the lantern light. What the fuck is this? Tensei tilted his head, confused, as if the singular word on it meant nothing to him. Nonetheless, it meant everything to Shouta. It was his last name, after all. Aizawa. How is that possible? Inside Hizashi Yamada's abandoned laboratory, there's a vial of blood, with Shouta's family name labeled across it. Tensei looked genuinely concerned. Hizashi was only 10 when it happened. He just had the room locked up and cleaned it, or have anyone go inside. It's why it's left. Since he refused to come up in here, so not everything is exactly hygienic. I assure you it isn't a recent sample. The Aizawa family was wiped out that night. Your contact, Imija Fukuyami, could test that sample to learn of its age. Shouta almost dropped the vial at his family blood. He was trembling like a leaf. That night. Tensei knew about that night. And just like that, with 7 days remaining, Shota's carefully carved plan began to fall apart. What does the Aizawa family have to do with Hizashi? He asked, his tone demanding. It echoed around the dusty room. From the moment Shouta had entered the mayor, Tensei must have put together an idea about the reason he had been sent. He'd certainly spent hours of uncertainty, caught between revealing his knowledge or pretending to believe Shouta was a donor. Yet, now that look of trust and kindness immediately vanished from the vampire's face. There was now a tense in his shoulder, and that Shouta recognized. It was the same tense that Tensei had recognized in him. It was trained into every slayer, whether they were a human or a vampire. Who are you? Tensei asked, an edge in his voice that felt wrong, coming from him. When I was 10, Shouta began, his voice trembling with every word. A vampire used their quirk to knock down my family mare, was trapped beneath the wreckage, too scared to even cry out, was forced to sit there, unable to move, while that leech drained the life from my father, mother, and brother, and all I could do was listen to their screams. His heart was wild in his chest, and there was no doubt Tensei could hear it. For 2 days, I was trapped under that building, thinking of nothing but vengeance. You are the 6th, Tensei said, his eyes wide with amazement, although his shoulders didn't stop tensing as he moved slowly into the room. Hisashi's father is dead. He was killed by the best vampire slayer in the country. I know. When Shouta had been freed, his rescuer had told him the vampire who destroyed his life, who had been plotting vengeance against for the 2 traumatic days of fear and solitude, had died the same night of the attack. So that's why you're here, Tensei asked, still wheeling purposely forward, so he could place the towel on the table near the entrance. Something about that motion made Shota's sense squirm, but he was too preoccupied by the revelation to pay it any attention. Hisashi is a victim too. If you're here for vengeance, then he's the wrong target. Vengeance? So that was the new reasoning. If Shouta had known Hizashi Yamada was the son of that monster, he never would have let him touch him. Why else would you be here? Tensei wheeled slowly, backwards now, towards the door, although he never turned his back to Shouta. The human turned his attention to the desk beside him. You haven't answered my question, Shouta said firmly. There was a book just barely in the circular glow of his lamp. Shouta reached for it, his heart hammering like a fearful animal. Tensei moved quickly. Just as Shouta touched the leather-bound tome, his movements was punctuated by a slam. He spun around, lenses blaring as the light dimmed. Tensei had left the lab. Shouta forgot the book momentarily, running to the doors, but a firm click on the other side told him Tensei had locked them. He turned to the table where he placed the bronze key, but instead, there was just a clean towel in its place. Tensei had purposely wheeled into the room to grab the key, keeping Shouta just preoccupied enough to not notice. The Slayer threw his body at the door, but it didn't even budge. These doors were built to be secure. You have some time to think, Shouta, Tensei called from beyond. When Hizashi returns, you'll be answering his questions. Let me out, Shouta called, banging on the doors. I hope you find the answers to your questions. I truly do. Unfortunately, I cannot give you any. The sound of retreating wheels made Shota's bang grow momentarily louder, before he gave up entirely. Fuck! He pressed his forehead against the door, trying his best to control his breathing. Hizashi was the son of the man who killed his family, who ruined Shota's life, who inspired him to become a vampire slayer so he can stop other leeches ruining the lives of other children. And not only had Shouta let Hizashi drink his blood, he had slept with him. Shouta scratched at the scar in his neck. What could this be? He purposely chosen to target Hisashi's house to get invited to Overhaul's party. But had Hizashi targeted him too? How had he possibly known? Shouta had been put into witness protection as a child. His name had never featured in any singular paper, and his last name had been removed from all documentation. He turned, knowing the door was too strong to break through, and he once again reached for the journal he spied in the lantern light. Shouta needed answers. As he flipped through it, his breath caught further in his throat, and he shook his head. The book contained jargon that completely flew over Shota's mind, but the gist of it was spiraled on every page, in detail, years of experimentation of old bloodlines, although Shouta didn't recognize any of them until he reached the end of the book. The leech had been interested in the phenomenon of blood evolving different properties, and had experimented on triggering and duplicating it. Judging by most of the cases presented, there was a string of failures, after utter failure. And then Shouta read the last document case, and the name appeared again, Aizawa. However, as he read, another word leaped out at him, and he had to slam the book shut. Shouta leaned back against the desk and simply sat there for a time, the room impossibly dark beyond the glow of his lantern. Dark figures loomed beyond its safe reach, even though he knew he was alone there, as he had been back in the rubble of his childhood home. The word ran through his head again, making his hands shake, and he resumed scratching the bite mark on his neck until it bled. Aphrodisiac. It was all too much for him to comprehend. Hizashi sighed as he sat in front of the seat of his car, Oboro driving them home. I don't see what was wrong about those doors. I agree, Oboro said, pursing his lips at the rearview mirror for Khan to see. I thought they looked great. Khan rubbed his temples and shook his head. They were gold-plated and decorated with stars. Even if I'll let you buy them, Tensei would just make you return them. But they were pretty, Hizashi said with another Floridum sigh. The old ones don't even need replacing. I said from the start we were only going to hire someone for repairs. Hizashi continued to look forlornly out his window as the world flew past. Well, at least they were nearly home, but then he would have to talk to Shouta about what happened the previous day. He couldn't stop himself from grinning goofily as he thought about it, however. Maybe Shouta had enjoyed it too. Maybe he'd want to do it again, and then he'd maybe fall for Hizashi, and, well, was that really an option? Well, who knows about what the future held? The mayor soon appeared, but he was surprised to find Tensei waiting between the dented front doors, his expression locked in a troubled frown. Oboro parked the car at the front, but Hizashi didn't wait for his door to be open as he hurried out on his own, passing the first angel statue, as he headed up the staircase. Is everything okay? Hizashi asked, urgently, ignoring the sound of Kan and Oboro close behind him. We need to talk about Shouta, Tensei said, turning and heading back inside. Nomori was waiting there, appearing uncharacteristically nervous. This couldn't have been about Hisashi sleeping with a donor, if that was her reaction. Is he okay? Hisashi followed the butler closely, and glanced around but found no sign of Shouta waiting for their arrival. Where is he? Hisashi held up a key. It was small and frozen, and Hisashi's stomach instantly sank. He's locked up in the laboratory. Khan stepped in the way with a growl. Why the hell did you let him in there? He's a vampire slayer, Tensei said, and Hisashi's world grew still. He was dead silent, as were Khan, Oboro, and Nomori. Tensei inhaled deeply. I thought he was here investigating your father's past, to ensure you weren't continuing his experiments. How long have you known? Hisashi asked, his voice a whisper. There was no doubting his friend. Hisashi had known there was something off about Shouta from the very start, when his neck had carried the scent of a silver collar, but he foolishly ignored every single warning sign. I've had my theories from the start, the butler answered. Mostly it was just a feeling, but I knew the signs to look for. And you didn't think to warn us? Khan was fuming, his breathing hard, as he did his best to control his rage. I thought he was investigating, Tensei said firmly. Khan immediately stepped back at the butler's tone. The worst thing you could do for an investigation is learn about it. Especially since we're all innocent. He would have noticed you were acting unnatural and would have grown suspicious. He's a racerhead. I don't think too much about him specifically, but I know he has the best track record of any other vampire slayer. Oboro fidgeted. The best record of vampires killed? Tensei shook his head. Of innocent civilians saved. The only one who might have a better record for it is All Might, and only because he's been a slayer for far longer. Should have helped me fight off the two rogue vampires. Without his help, I'm not sure I would have succeeded. He cut his arm, Hisashi said absently, to distract them with his blood. He didn't even know about Slayer Eraserhead, outside of maybe hearing his name once or twice. You didn't want All Might to recognize him. This mission is an important enough secret that Shouta let you drink from him. It seemed imperative that he remained undetected. However, after recent events, he cast a quick gaze towards Hisashi. I wanted to speed up the investigation. I decided that showing him the lab in its state of disuse would be the final piece of evidence needed to prove your innocence. And then you locked him in there? Oboro questioned while tilting his head. That seems super counterproductive. I was wrong, Hisashi. Tensei spun one wheel till his body faced the blonde, but his head bowed. He isn't here to investigate on behalf of the government. By the sounds of it, he's here for revenge. Hisashi's heart skipped a beat. Revenge? For what? His full name, whispered the ex-slayer, is Shouta Aizawa. His knees went weak. If it hadn't been for Khan quickly catching him, Hizashi Yamada would have collapsed to the cold, tiled floor. Shouta Aizawa. He recalled a recent conversation he had with Tensei, perhaps a month ago. The blonde had found an old newspaper that had detailed the success of the Aizawa family, dated long before the tragedy. However, to his surprise, the article had mentioned 2 sons instead of 1. At first, he thought it was a typo, but after a thorough investigation, Hisashi had discovered that there had been a second, younger son, of about Hisashi's age, who hadn't been mentioned in articles permeating that night. There was no remaining photos of the entire family, and the focus of every article was on the Aizawa parents, to the point where the 2 sons were only ever mentioned by age rather than name. But there were constantly 2. Hisashi had poured over years and years of obituaries, but had found nothing hinting at the second child's death, meaning only one thing: the boy had survived. There had been 6 victims, instead of 5. How'd he know? Hisashi whispered as he struggled to right himself. He might. All might change my records. My name was never revealed to the public. There's no way he could have known. His quirk made his final words buzz. He smacked his hand over his mouth as his stomach spun laps around his other organs. Sensei shook his head. I don't know. Admittedly, he seemed confused when he saw the lab. I locked him in there before he could lash out. He held the key to Hisashi. I haven't brought in other slayers. It isn't my place to decide what happens to him. Khan growled. We arrest him for impersonating a donor. That woman must have forged his documents. But it doesn't make sense, claimed Nomori, as she stepped into the fray. He'd had plenty of opportunities to hurt Hisashi. Hisashi's dad did kind of drain his family to death. She paused to see if Hisashi would say anything about the description, but he was too deep in a haze to completely register it. It was true. Why would he be willing to let Hisashi drink from him? Wouldn't he be scared that you'd do the same? If he's a slayer, then he must know a billion ways to kill vampires. Hisashi inhaled so deeply, it made his chest ache, and then he squeezed the tea tightly in his hand. Khan, Oboro, follow. He spun on his heel and marched up the stairs. His household followed behind as quickly as they could, with Oboro using a quick cloud to help Tensei keep pace up the stairs. Eraserhead has a quirk, Tensei told them as they moved. I know, Hisashi said firmly. He's a half-breed. More details you didn't care to enlighten us with? Growled Khan. His anger sparked the air. Erasure, Hisashi whispered, catching them by surprise. He mentioned it. Mr. Aizawa had a quirk called Erasure. There was silence, but to Hisashi it was a confirmation. Oboro, I need you to fog the room to stop him from seeing you. Khan, I'll need you to restrain him. Right, they said in tandem. As they reached the top floor, they were by his side, and as soon as they were outside the double doors, Hisashi had avoided for 20 long years. Everything was silent inside. A nod from the blonde signaled the start of their strategy. Oboro held his hand forward, the dark crowd seeping beneath the doorway, fogging the room. At the same time, Kong slung his upside-down fangs to his arm. The vampire's blood rose from the wound and followed Oboro's fog beneath the door. There was a short commotion beyond, but, with vision impaired, Shouta had been unable to escape Khan's attack. The vampires both nodded, and Hisashi unopened the door. The alternative click sent a shudder down his spine. But now was the time to be brave. He spent his life running from his past, but now it was time to meet it head on. Wait here, he told his friends, but paused when Tensei offered him a lantern. I'm sorry, whispered the butler, his face downcast. Hisashi took the lantern, but also placed a hand on Tensei's shoulder. I don't blame you, he whispered back. Thank you. With the light source in hand, Hisashi braved the dark room. Tables, cluttered with vials and books, loomed out at him from the smoke, disoriented shapes that reminded him of monsters. However, as he reached the center of the room, he stepped into the eye of the storm. Shouta was at its ends, his arms, legs, and torso encased in thick, crystallized blood. He struggled against it until he noticed Hisashi, and the blonde finally understood what Nomori had meant. She once told him Shouta wasn't scared of him. She told him that she knew what fear looked like, and Shouta hadn't reflected that. He knew better now. Shouta hadn't been scared of him before, but now he was terrified. His dark eyes tried to raise, but was held down with moisture. His eyes turned red, like a vampire in a blood frenzy. He was a cornered animal with no escape. You, Shouta said, his tone dripping with complete malice. You're his. Hizashi opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. So, his erasure quirk worked on his non-quirk voice as well. The blonde waited calmly for erasure to end. He killed my family, Shouta continued, baring his teeth. I had to listen to their dying screams as he drained them. You're just as twisted. You toyed with me, knowing all along just who I was. I thought you were, but all along, I was already... He stopped, his brain wrathed. And then, without warning, Shouta just gave up. Dark hair felt wetly about his shoulders, only moved by his heaving shoulders as he breathed. Water driplets dripped to the floor, and it took Hizashi far too long to realize there were tears. It's over, Hizashi told him, his voice softer than he intended. His heart was broken by the sight of the defeated human. If you wanted your vengeance for what my father did, then I guarantee that I suffer with the guilt every single day of my life. For what it's worth, I am sorry for it. However, I have people here who I must protect. Hizashi straightened up and tried to keep his quirk from flipping to his words. My father ruined the life of 6 people, so I saved the same number. You were just the 6. Apparently, you were the 6 in both cases. But I swear, I had no idea who you were. Shouta was completely unresponsive. If it hadn't been for the periodic rise and fall of his shoulders, and the occasional tear falling to the dusty floor below, he might have thought he was dead. I'm not going to hurt you, Hizashi confirmed. But I need to turn you in. Shouta shook his head. Please, you can't. His voice sounded broken. I need to protect. You're not making sense. Hisashi's heart ached to see Shouta like this. You need to protect what? Overhaul. Hisashi's head snapped back in surprise. He'd completely forgotten about the upcoming ball, even though it was only days away. He never told Tensei about Shota's demand to attend it. Yet more red flags he ignored. You need to protect Overhaul? Shouta shook his head and finally looked at Hizashi. His dark fringe parted enough to reveal a pair of sad eyes, yet determined eyes. Even when his spirits were shattered, there was a fire that burned deep in his core. Then Shouta said it, and the final piece of the puzzle fell into place. Overhaul kidnapped my daughter. Oh my god, for the Wolfie, my dude. My dudette, dude, I don't know. I'm crying. This is the second time I'm reading it. Give me a second. This is the second time I'm reading this, and it still hurts. Oh my god, the hurting pain that Hisashi's feeling, obviously, the hurting pain that Shouta's feeling, added upon this, the fact that literally just a couple chapters ago, they had intercourse, which, not even just a couple chapters ago, literally the day before this. Hours before this, technically, if we're being honest. Like, what, 10 hours before this? It hits so much more harder. I'm crying for the Wolfie. Thank you very much. You're a very good writer. Thank you. I appreciate your work. I'm crying. I don't know about you guys. I'm crying. Also, big reveal. His daughter. I wonder who that could be. You know, Overhaul kidnapped his daughter. That's why he's been doing this, and I can finally talk about this. Oh my god, the dedication he has for his daughter. He's doing all this for his daughter. Everything. He doesn't care. Even when he's given up and he's absolutely terrified, he still is thinking about his daughter. That is the first thing on his mind. Like, I bet you he doesn't care if he gets killed or not. All he cares about is if his daughter is safe. Daddy issues? Be speaking to me right now. Daddy issues be screaming at me. Anyways, this was a very emotional chapter, obviously. I think I finally stopped crying and stuff because, you know, It's been a while. It's been a while. Not a while. I mean, like, I stopped crying. I had to retake Shota's crying and his breakdown so many times because you know how hard it is to cry in a deep voice? Like, oh my god. That shit's hard. That shit's hard. I'm sorry. It was hard to imitate, and hopefully I did it right. Hopefully, I didn't frick up the voice acting or anything like that. Apologies, it might not sound to the best of qualities. It is a bit hard to voice act when I'm doing different voices and stuff. I've gotten more used to it. Clearly, I've improved over the time. I've noticed that myself. So hopefully I did better because I've never had to do one where Shouta was crying. That's a first. That is a first. Shouta crying is a first in here. Or, I mean, like, voice acting. I've read many Shouta crying fanfics, and I very much when Shouta is a crier. I appreciate that. So, for the Wolfie, I think you're doing a wonderful job with pacing, and that reveal was just amazing. I feel like your pacing for the story is magnificent and wonderful and amazing, and the way you set everything up slowly with the foreshadowing and the ground building and stuff like that, the subtle little hints, the subtle little plates and stuff like that, it all builds up perfectly to bring up this grand beam of things. Like, this was a great reveal. A lot of the times authors have a hard time doing a great reveal or doing a great thing or doing this whole suspense of like, ooh, who's right, what's wrong, what is this, what is that, because the author gets so enveloped in trying to do a whole like, oh, shocker surprise, that they don't put the effort to actually put in the ground bases. But you definitely put the effort in the ground bases. I could tell. The first read, I could immediately tell that you put in the effort because I started sobbing. And by sobbing, I mean I cried for like 30 minutes because my heart ached. My heart hurt for him. Like, oh, I'm gonna start crying again. God damn it. For the Wolfie. God damn it. Why do you have to be a good writer? God. Okay, obviously I'm not sobbing. I'm just tearing up and like tears are going down. But like the first read, I promise you, for the Wolfie and my other, raindrops, I was sobbing for at least 30 minutes, at most like an hour and a half. I was sobbing. I was blasting music and sobbing my guts out because, oh my god, was that such an emotional impact. And I really hope that my voice acting for this and my narration did it justice, honestly. I really hope it did it justice, and I really hope that my Aizawa voice acting him crying was okay and didn't sound weird at all, or like weirdish, or like sound like it was acting or something like that. So like I really hope I did that well because this chapter really deserves justice, honestly. So I wonder where they're gonna go from here because like, where they're gonna go from here, except I already know because I've already read this. And I very much love this fic. Am I gonna take another reread? Yeah, except this time I have my own podfic to listen to. Am I gonna listen to it? No, because I think the sound of my voice is weird. I'm probably gonna be listening to these in the past once I start testosterone, which I wonder how that's gonna go. For somebody who creates content based around my voice and me reading things out loud, taking testosterone, which will greatly change my voice, I wonder how that's gonna go and how my voice acting and the voices for my characters are gonna change because of testosterone. But don't worry, that ain't coming soon, because I still need a therapist for that. I need a call. Anyways, as always, my raindrops, make sure to eat, sleep, drink water, take your meds. Have a wonderful day or night. Link to my Discord server and socials are down in the description. Subscribe to see more of my content, and thank you so much for watching.